Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and today we're going to talk about resolve and confidence. And today's guest has them both like no one else, and she's used them to fuel her voice that calls her to adventure. Sophie Hilaire is with us today, and she has a long list of taking on the biggest and best challenges. She's a graduate of West Point and a U.S. Army veteran, which included combat deployment in Afghanistan. She has an MBA from the Wharton School of Business, and she worked for the elite McKinsey & Company consulting firm. Sophie has climbed to the summit of Mount Everest, and she encountered death along the way. After all of this, she quits her six-figure job and moves out of her New York City apartment to spend 2 years of self-discovery living in a van. But this story is not about the achievement. It's about the person and the fire behind who she is. She describes herself as a lifelong misfit and thrill-seeking veteran who quit her six-figure job to take on homesteading, healing, and helping others shepherd their deepest dreams into reality. And as you can tell by her accomplishments, Sophie is a badass. Yet, she exudes loving kindness, and I can't wait to share her story with you all. Sophie, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you, Scott. What a nice intro. I appreciate it.
We got to dive in. We have so much to cover here, Sophie. I'm just so inspired by this whole thread. And I really enjoyed the first conversation that you and I had before this. So I want to start with a quote that I found on a social media post that you made. And you said in that post, "I grew up thinking my achievements were my value. No matter what I accomplished, even summiting Mount Everest, people told me what actually inspired them about me is that I've always known I can do anything." Can we talk about your upbringing and what got you to that point of belief and confidence in yourself?
Well, this is a very appropriate place to open, I feel. It kind of gets to the heart of everything. So I'll just go deep. Yeah, I think on one hand, that statement could probably sound really, I don't know, just like I'm really into myself and a little overconfident, but it really, I promise you, it comes more from many years of blind spots and not actually understanding what I was doing. So I think, but yeah, I truly believe this. I know this for myself, and I actually know this for everyone else too, is that anyone can do anything. But for me, where this comes from is definitely my upbringing. So I was raised to be very achievement focused. I don't think that's unusual, especially in American society or plenty of other societies. But I think my upbringing had a particularly it just had a little twist to it because it was, achievement focused, but also the way I was raised was that that was just how you received love. There was a finite amount to go around. It wasn't unconditional, it was very much conditional.
Mm.
And that was the price to pay, I guess, like achieve as much as possible, be the shiny object, be the favorite for the day. I think parents probably raise kids like that with the best of intentions, but it was hard on me, especially as the oldest of 3 kids, because there was also a lot of violence in the home, and I would say 90 something percent of it was directed at me, and it was a pretty intense kind of violence. It was not, um I don't think it was typical. It was, very physical, very, I would say, emotionally abusive too, but the ways that are very, just the things I remember most from my childhood were, knives, blood, chainsaws, just a lot of intense violent things. So, I think because I already survived hell by the time I left the house at 17, ever since then, everything's just been pretty easy. Yeah. I think, the strongest version of me ever is not necessarily today. I'd say I'm stronger in other ways, but just being able to withstand, like, the most intense things. I mean, that was, like, me by age 17. That version of me was the badass. Now I'm kind of, like, trying to soften and, like, get rid of some. So, but she's the one who made everything easy ever since then, and I think that having, this kind of trauma in your background, you know, I'm I talk about it a lot more now because I think it's something that people, don't talk about, and the thing is, like, that trauma is what made me who I am today, and I think that trauma is never a great thing in and of itself, obviously, but would I ever go back and change my childhood for a different one? Definitely not. Like, there's gifts that I've extracted from having to go through this hard stuff that I didn't choose. But I think that's what's, led me you read off this list of things at the beginning of this call. It's kind of funny to, like, sit back and hear that from someone else. But yeah, where does that come from? I mean, to be honest, it's not like all of the positive things I used to talk about, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just, like, scrappy because I like challenges." There's something dark underneath all of that, but I've chosen to work on it and, try to look at it more as, like, almost a superpower in adulthood than something that holds me back and keeps me in this victim state.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for just like the rawness and the vulnerability. Like I have a few things like you picked up right on the beginning, this idea of this, this resolve and this strong self-confidence. Like as I was writing it, like I was thinking to myself that like yes, I could see how people would see that as, I'm going to say for lack of a better word, like an arrogance, but I also knew that you knew that this is so much bigger than you, and it is about like, this confidence that all of us have inside it. Somehow you've been able to bring it out like earlier in your life. And I just think that's such an important point.
Yeah, and I think, it's funny because I haven't inhabited all these kind of different chapters or dimensions or worlds within this lifetime, which, it's something I can't escape doing. I'm just curious about a lot of different things, but it's funny because like, the people who are from the last chapter I was in, maybe like my New York City, McKinsey, whatever, consulting chapter, they think what I'm doing now is really crazy, but the thing is, like, all the other people who I'm around now who are doing this, like, this is just normal. So, there's this quote that I heard someone say one time that was, "You don't have to know what you're doing to start doing it, and if you don't start, it'll never happen."
Mm.
And I love that because it just th it speaks to me so much. It just sums up, like, this beginner mindset I'm happy to jump into anything with, that I'm just excited to know more about because, you know, that quote just basically gives you permission and a kick in the butt to just go start doing whatever it is. And I really think that doesn't apply to just people with trauma, that could literally be anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't start, it'll never happen. So yeah, so you kind of addressed like the struggle, the adversity. You talked about violence in your childhood. You also talked about, I think I've heard you say before, like tiger parenting, and this sort of like achievement mindset that was kind of instilled in you. Like, could
Mhm.
you just talk a little bit more about that sort of achievement mindset that was kind of nurtured into you?
Yeah, so I'm half Korean and my dad's, Caucasian, grew up in Pennsylvania. But, like, my mom definitely had the more dominant parenting
Mhm.
style in the house, and that's like the some people actually haven't heard the term tiger parenting. Is like, it was made famous by this book. But it's basically, the way that Asian parents specifically, like, obsess about achievement with their kids, and they've gotta be, like, perfect at all these piano lessons and the A pluses and everything. Um, so, yeah, I was just raised in that, and to me, it was normal. It was also normal in some ways because it kinda seemed like all the other half Korean kids that I was friends with
Mm.
seemed to have. I wouldn't say anyone had as violent of a situation as me, but I also didn't know because I just assumed everyone had a life like this and no one was talking about it because I knew better than to talk about it. So yeah, to me that was just normal, but it kind of started off as a kid, with you've got to be the best in every single class, like get the best grades, and then you've got to be the one that's chosen to go do these extra things. And yes, the piano lessons, like, we're going every single week and you're practicing every day, and, even, kind of other things. Like, I remember one summer, I literally, like, had to read the dictionary from cover to cover. When I think about a couple of the books I read when I was younger, literally, I read the Bible in 2nd grade, and then I read this dictionary, and just things like that. It was so, like, I got, but in my head, it was almost, like, kind of fun to have this goal that was kind of big and work towards it, and if you just keep working towards it, you're gonna get there, and you'll be done with it at one point, and when you look back, you'll be really satisfied, and maybe you'll have learned a bunch of stuff. So yeah, it was kinda just like the training, I guess, of, being hyper focused on achievement, and that was kind of the building blocks of how to get there, but the way it made, me feel, I think it was just this never ending, you know, like these little things, like discrete things like finishing a book, I could do that, but that was like a temporary thing because the bigger thing of what I was actually trying to achieve through this, getting validation from parents or feeling loved, that was just like a thing, nothing was ever enough, and I would just spend, many, many, many years chasing that and turn me into this archetype I would consider the insecure overachiever, which, which is a dangerous place to be when you get mixed up with the wrong people, but yeah, that was kind of, how my brain was programmed.
Just to back up some context on how you and I met, you are an author in the new book by Miriam Lancewood and Lori King, Wilder Journeys. And in that, you talk about your experience on Mount Everest. And there's a number of things that you kind of go through, and we're going to talk about some of that today. But one of the things that you mentioned in that chapter is this idea that trauma passes through 14 different generations.
Mhm.
And I kind of would love to just hear a little bit more about that. I've heard some of that before, but I'd love to, like, more explicitly, you've got some knowledge on this. I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts on that.
I find epigenetics so interesting. That's where that came from. I think it was a study where they were able to, like, track this DNA getting passed on through worms or something, but they say it's in people too. So the example that I always hear is that the offspring of Holocaust survivors have, even if they never lived through anything even remotely similar, something in their DNA and their, like, stress hormones are permanently altered. And this continues on for 14 generations. But at any point in time, like, each person can also impact the next 14 generations. So yeah, there are going to be things that live in all of us that come from ancestors that I would say most of us probably can't go back 14 generations. I personally can't even tell you a single name 3 generations back on I can't even tell you one of my grandfather's names. And there's so much history, that's just lost before that. But I tell you what, like, your body keeps the score, and that still lives in all of us. So I think the reason I get so interested in epigenetics is because I don't know these stories that came before me. I'm very, very aware of the generation before me and like some of the generation before that, but anything before that, I hardly know anything. And I'm just very curious because I feel like there's some answers there about, I don't what landed me in this exact, life, being born in rural Ohio of mixed race on both sides, and the challenges that have come up and the gifts that I've had, and the much easier start in life I've had than plenty of my ancestors probably. And also because I know that if left unchecked, a lot of the dark stuff that comes from both sides will just perpetuate and continue on. These are called family cycles, and a lot of people, just think of it as like, well, you're all just growing up in the same house. Like, that's how this always continues to just keep happening. But, and yes, that's definitely a big part of it, this learned behavior, but also it's like literally in our DNA. So if I were to keep the human species going for another generation beyond me, I would love to break as many of these cycles as possible that I think are really toxic.
Hey everyone, it's Scott here. This podcast is a passion project for me because I absolutely love adventure. And it's thanks to the effort of my residential real estate team here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that many of you know as the W Realty Group, that this podcast gets funded. This awesome group of people have unmatched levels of competence and caring for our clients. If you know of anyone looking to buy or sell a home, our team serves the Charlotte, North Carolina market, but we can also help you find an agent anywhere throughout the US or Canada through our highly connected network. When you support our real estate business, you are also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your referrals. Yeah, it's wild. So, what I'm hearing you say is things that happened to ancestors 14 generations ago may still exist in me.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And things that happen to me may still exist 14 generations from now. And so I have the power to affect that many people down the line, positively and negatively. What do we do with that information?
I think we just for me personally, I just wanna even if, like, I don't have kids, I just think we can all affect all these other people's it's not like, "Oh, it's just, in our DNA." There's things it's because it's a choice to reprogram your DNA and to take a different path. I think, yeah, the unconscious path is just, "Okay, just let's just keep these cycles, this brand of toxicity going for another generation." And so, yeah, I just wanna do as much as I can to not perpetuate that. That would be, yikes, almost criminal, I would think, but
You,
it's pretty normal.
you said one thing I want to just hit before we move past. So you said we can reprogram our DNA.
Mhm.
So for people listening, like, how do you do that?
Oh, I think it's a lot of, like, doing the work, if you will, which is really vague, and I used to get so mad when people would say things like that because I knew that there was something I was trying a problem I was trying to solve here, but I couldn't wrap my hands around it, like, what is doing the work? What is the work? Can someone give me a manual for this? But there is none, and, it's been for me, of course, I'm not done doing the work, I never will be, but you have to kinda go just start seeking and stumbling into a bunch of different things in order to see what pieces of your own puzzle, like, you start to heal and understand and reprogram. For me, what that's looked like is a lot of books, like many years of weekly therapy, conversations and friendships with people who have opened my eyes to different perspectives, going back and talking to people from my past who were adults then, who had like an adult perspective on what was going on in my household, who could help explain things to me in almost sometimes even a clinical way, which gives me clues on like what books I can go read next, what Facebook groups to go join where people are, all these strangers like had a very similar experience about different things and how they were raised and how, able to like share resources, information to heal each other. So, yeah, I mean, if I really think it's like our generation that's has access to all these tools now finally. It's just a matter of getting over the aversion to using them because I think there's a lot of like I think there's, that's more of that toxic old stuff just trying to keep people stuck in these old patterns. So, but yeah, all the information's out there now. If you have any desire to work on yourself, like nothing could hold you back. You could literally find out everything probably on YouTube, but you need to be curious and study yourself to know what even keywords to go search and yeah, what to look up.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's such an interesting topic to me and something I'm really interested in. I think people are starting to wake up to it more and more and recognize it's not woo woo anymore. It's
Mm.
real.
It's so
Um,
human. Yeah.
yeah. So, Sophie, you have had a few different phases. I'm going to call them phases or chapters in your life, and I'd love to, in the time that we have, just kind of just touch on each one of them and sort of some of your learnings and some of the motivations, like what kind of got you to that place, and then we'll talk about this thread that kind of ties them together. But you went to West Point and joined the Army and had
Mhm.
a deployment in Afghanistan. Can you kind of talk us through that chapter? Like, can you talk about that, the voice inside that called you to that path?
Well, I mean, I went to West Point when I was 17. It's funny because people think of like West Point or especially boot camp when I started as like prison, and West Point kinda looks like a prison, feels like a prison, but to me, at that age with my worldview, West Point was freedom. To me, it was, I was immediately financially independent. I, was gonna have a I was in college for 4 years, was gonna have a job for the next 5 years being an army officer, and freedom from even having to make decisions about what to do next in my life, because with the one decision to go to West Point, it was like the next 9 years were already decided for me. So to me, West Point was freedom because like when I got there, I was like, okay, no one can. Yes, these upperclassmen can sort of make your life hell in different ways, or make you do a bunch of push-ups or something, but like they can't hit you, they can't abuse you. There's like, the limits to what they could do compared to what I had just come from were, like, so kind and gentle and coddling almost that it didn't bother me. So that's why I went to West Point. I knew that my family and I were not on good terms at the time, and I was really just looking forward to being estranged and having some freedom and peace. I think also I've because I was so achievement focused and, like, had, lofty goals even as a kid that I would go after, to me, this was so different from where I'd come from that it was really interesting and attractive to me because I had just gone to an all-girls Catholic high school, and I was not I mean, did not grow up watching Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers. Like, this stuff was not, like, fun or interesting to me, and I was very kinda girly and, like to dress up, I don't know, do all the things that were just not typically associated with the army. I wasn't even, like, that much of an athlete in high school. So I just thought, "Ooh, like, if I go do this, I'm guaranteed to, like, become this, like, realize all these other aspects of myself that I've never really gotten to know." And also part of me wondered, like, "Oh, could I do this?" Like, it's not a guarantee. So, yeah, let's go for it.
Can I ask you, like, West Point, I mean, it has a reputation, like, I mean,
Mhm,
it commands respect, and I'm
mhm.
just curious if that reputation and, the degree to which a a degree literally from West Point, like, commands that respect. How did that play into your decision to go there, or did it?
Ooh, man, you're making me think of things that I'm not even sure I was aware of. Well, I think I've historically been very drawn to strong authority figures, whether that was my mom, where it all started, or, the authority of West Point, like you pointed out, obviously the whole military rank structure. Then even at McKinsey, when I was doing
Mhm.
consulting, like there's definitely, they'll tell you it's a flat organization, but it's definitely not. Yeah, just having like someone tell me what to go do felt oddly comforting, even but probably even not only even if, especially if it was like, kinda had like a, high stakes or like, something a little edgy
Yeah,
that it was laced with.
yeah,
So, I do think that was also part of why I was drawn to there. Like, in some ways it felt like freedom, in other ways it felt like, just safety and the comfort of the familiar of being told what to do. Yeah, I think also just knowing going to West Point was going to come with a 5-year service obligation, and the year that I went there was 2005, a few years into the war. That felt also, like, just really kind of thrilling, exciting. I mean, I wanted to be part of something bigger. I wanted to be part of this moment in history that, I mean, I think, very differently about now. But at the time, like, just being around violence, I was pretty comfortable with that, and I realized not every like, that was the thing that most people were like, "Oh, I could never join the army because, like, I would hate being told what to do," or, "I'd be too scared to be in the army," and, like, none of these things ever crossed my mind. So, I kinda knew also I was, like, uniquely programmed to probably do just fine in that type of a context. So,
yeah. So speaking of, looking for somebody to tell you what to do, especially as it comes to going to do something edgy, you were deployed to Afghanistan after school. Can you talk about that?
yeah. I mean, that's the only thing I really wanted to do in the army. That was my one big goal. I wanted to deploy. I wanted to feel like like leading soldiers in combat, be like really in it. Like I didn't want to just fly overhead. I didn't want to like do it from a computer far away. Like I wanted to be in it. I wanted to like be with the locals and like feel like I was making an impact on the ground. During the day, I was doing humanitarian work for a provincial reconstruction team that was teaching the Afghans how to farm things other than poppy, but still make a living. So it was like farming and animal husbandry and really interesting work, actually. Not sure how effective it was,
Oh,
but
I'm seeing the beginnings of the thread though.
yeah,
We'll get
yeah,
back to that.
exactly.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
And then at night, I was going on raids to, yeah, help detain suspected terrorists by getting information and searching the women and children in the home. So I did feel like I got to experience everything I wanted in a deployment. I saw like, I was in their homes quite frequently in these mud huts or culottes, and I got to kind of feel like I was traveling in a foreign land. I got to like fly into remote areas in the middle of the night and just be on a foot patrol for days. Like seeing these parts of the world that, I mean, we probably look like we had just touched down from outer space, the way we were dressed, the way we were, acting, talking, and it was, like, what an interesting experience to have, and also, there were some dark things, nothing, like, too crazy that happened with my team on deployment, so we were really lucky. I feel like in a lot of ways, I just got to experience, a lot of the highlights of, like, being in this beautiful country, um, without, a lot of the traumatic effects that I know a lot of people came away with. I mean, for me, that was more my childhood than, like, time in the army messing me up in the head. But yeah, I'm really glad that I got to do that, and, when I came back from Afghanistan, the only thing that would have kept me in the army was going to Korea, because my mom's from Korea, and I knew that there was a lot of, like, unhealed, unknown stuff going back, especially on that
Mm,
side for those all those generations, and
yeah.
there was a piece of me I didn't fully understand because I didn't really like, it was a little weird growing up in middle of nowhere, Ohio, with, like, an Asian mom when, like, that's totally not the norm out there. Yeah, I stayed in for an extra year to go, work for a general in Korea, which was a great experience, and then at that point, I got out.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for your service. And I know we could do a whole podcast episode just on your time at West Point and in the Army.
Oh.
I wanna continue through these chapters. Before we leave the military, though, and in the spirit of Sophie and her accomplishments, I do want to mention your Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon in full military uniform. How did that happen?
Well, yeah, I guess on the topic of just, like, setting lofty goals and going after them, when I first got to West Point, I was the most out of shape person in my platoon,
Yeah.
and that's really bad if you're a woman because you already stand out, and, it's not really in a good way, and I I was just kinda winging it like I do with a lot of things, but you can't really wing being, able to hang in a long run or a long ruck march, like, your body will literally just quit on you at a certain
Mhm.
point. So, I had to learn all that in real time when I was there, and so the biggest thing you'll see, it's like the PT test in the Army, 2-mile run, 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and those things, like, there's a number associated with that, which is, like, what your value is basically to this team. And, and my value was pretty low because out of a scale of 300, I think I had my first test, I had, like, a 141, which, like, is beyond failing. So, by the time I left West Point, I was, like, way above 300, almost at 400, like, 360 something. The work that it took to get there was, like, a lot of just, actually, I went from being so bad at running and falling out of every run by just I would just quit. I would just walk. I'd be like, "I'm just gonna start walking up this hill," and that is, like, the worst move you can do, but I couldn't actually move my legs fast enough. So, yeah, I actually decided I went from that to, "I'm gonna train for a marathon because that's gonna if I could do that, then I think that'll take care of this problem." Um, so I ran that marathon, and it actually went a lot better than I expected. I almost qualified for Boston the first time. So after that, I got a little hooked on marathons, and I set some goals within that. Okay, I want to qualify for Boston. I want to do it in this time. I want to, And so anyway, each year I would run 2 marathons, and I would train very dedicatedly for these.
Mhm.
One of them I would raise money for a veteran charity, and this went on for several years, and I was always asking the same people for, donations, and once I graduated from West Point, I just felt like it was a little different, like, it's not like, "Oh, support this college student in her marathon." It was like this grown woman who has a job now is still asking for so I felt like I still want to raise money for these causes, but I had to up the ante. I had to, like, make it a little different than, "Okay, I'm just gonna go do another marathon." So I remembered that I saw in the Guinness Book of World Records years before that there was a soldier who had run it in his full military uniform, and so I thought, "Okay, well, now that I have a good sense of what my marathon times are, I just wanna go back and see this time. Like, is it really ridiculous and out like, totally, some superhuman thing, or is it actually, like, something I could go for?" And I was surprised, it actually did seem doable. I think it was a little over 5 hours, and it was set by a British guy. And, the definition of a full military uniform that was established by this previous record was helmet, obviously like camo tops and bottoms, body armor with bulletproof plates inside, which are pretty heavy, and then boots. And so I was like, okay, this is about like, I don't know, somewhere between 35 to 45 pounds and over 5 hours. Like I was running marathons in 3 hours. So
Yeah.
or 3 and change. Um, so yeah, I just this time I just told everyone, "All right, this time I'm gonna go for this world record." Um, and that's another thing I do is, like, I know that if I want to do something, I'll just start saying I'm gonna do it, because if I keep telling people I'm gonna do this thing, I never wanna go back and then be that
Yeah.
type of
You're on the
person
hook.
never did it, yeah,
Yeah.
so I just start saying things until I'm like, "Okay, well, now I guess I have to do that." I've done this with so many things, but that was another one of them. And then as it got closer, I thought, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be really bad if, like, now these people have already donated money, but I don't get it." But, like, so many more people donated that year than any other year, and ultimately, I did end up, like, yeah, beating the record by, I don't know, almost 20 minutes,
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. Okay. So as we kind of move from your military career, the next thing is you go to the very elite Wharton School of Business and start working for McKinsey and Company, like always going after the best. How do you go from the military to an elite business school and an elite consulting firm?
To me, I knew I wanted to go to business school after I got out of the army because my dad had his MBA, and I always just kinda thought, "Okay, this world of business
Mhm.
seems, like, vague enough that I could do anything within it, and maybe even something fun and interesting, but in a way that, makes money and helps provide and all of that." But, yeah, so I went to Wharton. I was very grateful to have gotten in. Obviously, it's an amazing school. And then from there, though, I still, like, it's not like when I was in the army, I spent all this time researching the business world and had some dream about exactly what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't even know anything about the non-government space. So to me, consulting felt like a very, like, just logical way to enter the world of business, because as a strategy consultant for McKinsey, you know, as a generalist too, which is how I joined, which is no specialty, I would get to see every industry and every function, we call it a random walk, across so many different projects within, even just a couple of years was my goal. Just to, I was like, okay, try to just make it there 18 months. I ended up being there for 5 years. But yeah, to me, it was like almost like a continued education that I was getting paid for, because I knew by the end of however many months or years I was there, I would have, which is what I did end up leaving with, everything from government projects to marketing for a candy company to, operations for a steel company to, I mean, just the list goes on and on. So, yeah, because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, consulting felt like a really good way to learn a little bit of everything. And then I thought ultimately, like, once I'm ready, I will have found my perfect match. Like I'll love this one industry, or I'll love this one client, and I'll, get poached by them. Or, another well-worn path is, okay, now I've learned everything about how Fortune 100 companies do business. I've literally been telling the C-suite what their next move should be and how they should think about the next 10 years. Like, now I'm ready to go start my own company. Yeah, so that's kind of what led me to that path. I can't say any of that ended up ending the way I thought it would, but it also, like, continued to only open more doors for me. Obviously, the relationships you'll build there are really, important and powerful and lasting, even though I'm not really on that path anymore. And the skill set is huge. Like, the way you think through problems and problem solve and work on a team and just get anything accomplished is a skill set that I use today without even thinking about it. It's just intuitive at this point, and it helps me. Now I just try to channel it for things that I'm actually excited about and passionate about. Like, there was a business that reached out this year. It was an Amish country store in Idaho that wanted help getting funding and needed a business plan written up. Like, yeah, I could do that. And it's really exciting actually learning about the what's going on in an Amish country store.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's so, and this, what's interesting to me is, like, again, we started this podcast talking about your resolve and the self-confidence that you have. But, and we've also heard it said, you become the 6 people that you spend most time with. And like the people that you choose to be around, like that, fills you up and helps you become the person that you are. And it's very clear to me that your whole life you've always pursued the best.
Mm.
I mean, West Point, second to none. You know, you go into the US Army, now you're at Wharton, which is top business school, and McKinsey and Company, like top consulting company. I'm just curious, like, was that part of your intentionality as you were kind of going through really your life, like both the military career and the business career? Like, were you intentionally always seeking the best?
This is another thing that's probably really obvious to everyone around me, but, like, I've never really considered. Yes, I do think, like, now when you say it like that, I'm like, did I ever set myself up for, "Oh, I think I'll just go for this lower tier thing that might have a better quality of life or might," there's always a trade-off, less prestige. I think I chase prestige hardcore. That was something that I was kind of programmed to do, I think. What I've realized as after going through enough of these stage gates and experiencing enough of these elite institutions is there is something different about them, and that's why they have these reputations that they've worked so hard to get to, and I am very honored that any of them have, allowed little old me to enter their doors and be a part of, their history.
They were lucky to have you, all of them. You're being
Sometimes
humble.
sometimes I feel like I embarrass some of them now, but
Yeah.
but I also realized that looking to external anything for answers or validation is such a trap, and it's not, and I actually feel like, I'm not saying I could go start my own. I wouldn't even want to start my own consulting firm, but, there is a level of quality and a level of, like when I worked for this general in the army, I mean, obviously he was a 3-star general. The highest you can go is 4 stars. He was, like, pretty high up there,
Mhm.
and I got to see, what he does all day. I mean, I was the eyes on anything before it went across his desk. Like, I would even have to, like, basically distill down what other people wanted to communicate to him, and so I'm, like, very aware of what was going on at his level, and I'm also very aware of the standards that he had to get to that point. And I didn't always work for bosses in the army who were as tough as him or who just expected perfection that had to be so perfect. But I also, once I left that job, obviously there were things about her I was like, this stuff was just so, there's so much nonsense and things that I didn't see the point in. But when you kind of realize like the level that most people will operate at and not, because they don't expect that much from other people, it's just a different output. And I think there's value in that too, because believe me, I am, like, unwinding and trying to unravel a lot of, like, wound up stuff that I've had in me for
Yeah.
many years, but at the end of the day, like, that level of, people pushing themselves and, like, pushing their teammates for, sometimes it's perfection, sometimes it's a little too much, but you can't deny it puts out products that, like, all of us get to
Totally.
enjoy. So
It's it's powerful, it's important, and, it's people like you. We need people like you with that achievement mindset to move the world forward. It's so important. I don't wanna gloss over your business career, but there's more to the story because, you know, the next adventure is choosing the largest of the 7 summits, right? There's 7 summits that you could choose on this planet. You chose Everest.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have not done the 7 summits and not even really trying to that's never been a goal of mine, but yeah, Everest was one that I was
It's the
so, so
biggest.
fortunate to get to go to.
Yeah, so I'm curious but something happened on Mount Everest.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
I wonder
I
if
didn't
you
get
can talk about that.
Yeah, that was my only goal for Everest, actually. I mean, I had a few goals. The biggest one, though, was to come back changed, not the same person. It's a 2-month journey, so I didn't wanna just do another, like, 2 months of my everyday routine.
Yeah,
I knew I wanted to come back just changed, and then, obviously, I knew I was gonna come back in one piece, like, I paid handsomely for, the best tour operator on the mountain so that I didn't have to worry about dying there. So on the mountain, it was a crazy year because I went in 2019. And yes, Everest is always in the news every year when the season is happening. It's only, that one season, April through May.
right,
But, well, no, sorry. There's like a handful of people that go in the fall, but it's
mhm,
nothing like, the main season.
right.
And, but that year there were 13 deaths, which is a lot more than average, and that was the closest. I mean, it was just such an extreme. It's hard to, like, how do you even sum up this whole expedition in, like, a paragraph? It's hard, but yeah, there was so much beauty I experienced. I came back, you know, an insomniac because it was so good up there. I slept amazing on ice for those 2 months and, like, almost 12 hours a night. It was it was so good. It was so good. Yeah, I came back to, like, my harsh reality of the business suits and the emails and the laptop and the job that I wasn't passionate about, and it was rough. But, yeah, I just experienced so much magnificence in nature and also a lot of, these other harsh, intense, extreme things about the reality of life and the fragility of it, and what draws people like me to Everest, wanting to know, push out the boundaries of what your perceived limits are. It's like a really, I guess it's probably a pretty addicting thing for, people like us who, like, end up on this mountain. There's something very similar about everyone's, like, just knows this is one of those rare places you get to experience what your limits are. It's kinda like why I wanted to go into the army. I mean, I just thought, "Okay, well, in this lifetime, I could experience what it's like to be in a war, feeling like, you're on the good guy side. Like, why wouldn't I wanna experience that?" Or when I went to North Korea, this was a few years before Everest, and I just thought, "Okay, it's legal." Actually, I see here, it's actually legal for me to go. Why wouldn't I go for a week, run a marathon, and see what it's like? So, but yeah, same thing on Everest, and, I saw people pushing themselves way more. I mean, I see people push themselves at McKinsey, I see people bust their butts at business school or in the army for sure, but I never was around a bunch of people who, like, knew that and I was one of them, like, we are right dancing on the edge of death at any given time, and you actually don't know. You could feel amazing and just die of a heart attack in 1 second, and I don't know, but all I know is I continue to walk closer and closer to the death zone. Okay, now I'm literally in the death zone above 8,000 meters. Every second now I am dying, and yet I'm still going because in my head I'm like, "I just wanna get to this summit and see what's there, and then come back and be this new version of myself," and it was 1000% worth it. Obviously, because there wasn't much of a price to pay other than the financial one for me, which I don't miss that money at all. But yeah, there was something really intense about seeing people literally just trek themselves to death. And something about that I really respected, if I'm being honest. It's I see so many people, like, hold back 99% of what they could become or do in everyday life. And out there, I see people, like, literally dancing around 99.2, point 0.3, point 0.4, point 0.5, and then, like, just obviously, there's something about it. We should have some level of self-preservation, but I just don't normally experience, like, being around people who are literally pushing that hard, like, to the edge of their life as, like, a healthy person. So, a lot of things shifted in me by the time I came back.
Sophie, when you were on the mountain, you wrote about like witnessing death. And I'm just curious what that feels like for you when you're up that high and you're trekking to the summit.
Yeah, I kept wondering if that was about to be me. I wondered, you know, there's a lot of people at different points in the mountain that you would see that were dead. Some people have been there for decades. Some people have been lit, just hung. There's one body, it was like a scarecrow. I mean, it was the first one that I saw, and
Mm.
it was really hard because it's also you see it from afar, and you just know you have to keep walking closer and closer to it because it's literally on the trail. And then, yeah, just this moment where you're right next to this person that um, came to this mountain with the same dream as you, and now their soul has left and this body is still here. It was a lot. There's some bodies like that. There's some people who you just see like dragged along with a rope. Maybe they're not dead yet, but it's like going to be a pretty brutal, next several hours for their body getting like banged up and dragged down this mountain because they're lucky to even have that. There's people who were sitting down and getting yelled at by their teammates or guides, like, "You have to get up. The second you sit down, like, you're just not gonna get back up." And I didn't know, well, when I come back, is that person still gonna be sitting here, and the rest of their team's gone by then? This was more death than I'd experienced in any other part of my life. I, very fortunately, knock on wood, like, just haven't gone through that with, someone that I've been, like, grown up with and been extremely close to yet in my life. And in the army even, like, death was kind of a part of it, but it wasn't as much in my face anywhere close to, this mountain. But it did make you, I think when people do experience death, the loss of a loved one that's close to them, I mean, they always say the same thing. It just makes you realize life is short. Like, you should go do the things that, you've always been saying you're gonna do. And, there was, I think, something around being around, like, around that energy that I gleaned somewhat of, like, a similar takeaway, from that experience.
So you had that experience. You also had an experience at the summit where in your writing, I think I don't have it in front of me, but you said something to the extent that you felt whole.
Yeah, yeah. I felt it's such a hard thing to describe, and when I got to the summit, when I was approaching it, like, the steps leading up to it, and I'd seen this scene, this shape of, the crest of the summit of Mount Everest in, like, Nat Geo and all these things for, like,
Mm.
so many years, and I do like visualizing things, for manifesting and all of that, but this was a scene I did not dare to visualize because I felt like I was gonna jinx it if I got my heart set on it too much because it shouldn't have been about the summit. Obviously, that would have been great, but I knew, like, my first and foremost goal was just to come back transformed. And, but once it was actually happening and I was like, "Oh my gosh, wait, I've seen this before, and wait, it's, like, literally right there, and I can count the number of steps between where I am now and where I'm about to have this moment, and I'm not dead yet, and I feel like I'm okay." And then just stepping into that moment and, the sun was just starting to rise, it was right around 6 AM, and all the mountains are turning purple around you, and you're looking down at the highest mountains in the world because a lot of them are just all around
Mhm.
Everest, these other 8,000-meter peaks, and you're looking at China the same time you're looking at Nepal. I mean, it was j it was magnificent, and I got up there, and I also thought, "Okay, well, maybe I'll be so oxygen deprived by then that I won't be able to actually enjoy the moment, and it won't be until after I come back and, like, really integrate it that I'll be able to appreciate it," but I was good. I was not suddenly I wasn't nauseous anymore. I could have, like, skipped around, like, I was, I had nothing but energy. Yeah, there was a feeling in me that just felt really whole, and, like, I had everything I ever wanted. I didn't wanna leave.
Everything you ever wanted. So was there a standout emotion for you in that moment?
I would say just bliss,
Mm.
joy, like pure, uh, just connection with, like, God, but also oneself. There was there was just definitely a new level of, like, relationship with myself that I unlocked by getting up there and standing there because it's such a tangible way to kind of see, like, could I do this one thing? It's probably a thing every human knows about, the highest point in the world, and kind of wonders about or maybe assumes that they couldn't do, and for years, I was the person who assumed I couldn't do it. I know it's not like like, had this goal for many years. I just slowly, as I got into more, different things like adventure races and, just being outdoors more, I just started to bump into people who were training for big mountains, and when I heard them talking about it, I thought, "Oh, well, okay, now I'm actually hanging out with people who are doing this stuff," and it took many years for me to wonder, like, to turn that around on me and be like, "Wait, could I now do this?" But yeah, whatever that relationship that I unlocked with myself up there, it changed things. So I came back down from the mountain and, you know, I I couldn't lie to myself anymore about the life I had created and just that prestige was enough to get me to wake up every day and go do stuff I wasn't excited about. It
Mhm.
wasn't enough anymore. Or that, I needed authority figures to tell me what to do next. I actually, like, went off on a boss one day, and there were some other things that I started changing because I was like, "Okay, no, I'm not just gonna, like, hold this all in and just take it on," and I started to become probably one of those people who were like, "I can never join the army. I hate being told what to do," and I always thought, "Huh, why is it so hard being told what to do? You literally just go do what you were told to do." But then I realized, like, there's something that once you realize, like, you actually are much more an author of your own story, that,
Yeah.
like, it's a lot harder to just go blindly follow orders, and, you just start to trust yourself more and, like, give yourself permission to start questioning things that don't feel like they're in alignment.
Yeah. So, Sophie, for listeners, the chapter that you wrote in Wilder Journeys, Lori King and Miriam Lancewood, is about your experience on Everest. So I really encourage everybody to go get a copy of Wilder Journeys because it's a really good book. There's a lot of great authors in there that have been on this podcast. And I'm just excited to have you as part of that. So to hear that full Everest story, get a copy of Wilder Journeys. So you come back from Everest, you quit your job,
Mhm.
you move out of your New York City apartment, and you go on this 2-year self-discovery living in a van. What did you find out in that 2 years?
Oh, so much. It's like, oh, try to sum up, 2 years of van life. The van thing was really awesome for the exact moment of time that it was in. Like,
Yeah.
I got my van June of 2020. That was obviously a couple months into the pandemic, and it was just a weird time because most people were like, "All right, travel is over," and I'm never, and I'm cooped up in this apartment and I can't, that was kind of that was the experience for pretty much anyone. And I saw kind of this was the direction my life was going as a consultant who used to fly for work every week to go, be with clients on the ground, and now this was turning into, "Nope, now you just use from your computer. Oh, and because you don't have to travel, now this just bleeds into 20 hours a day, 7 days a week." And I thought, "Okay, well, if I'm gonna be doing this from my computer, like, I've been waiting for an excuse to be able to work remotely for many years." Like, if I could squeeze going home one day early, like on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday from the client site, like, to me, I could do so much with that one Wednesday. I could go out to dinner with a friend. I could, I just saw, like, there was so much I could do. And so now at this point, that's dangerous. Let Sophie be in a van doing this job. Um, but yeah, I took it to the extreme. I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna be doing this job from national parks then. I'm gonna be like." Yes, there are restrictions on how in some ways of what you can do because of what was going on with the state of the world, but I actually experienced so much freedom and freedom that I'd never had before because I'd always either, like, had roommates or been very strongly entrenched in a specific community at any given chapter of my life, and I'd never or, like, been in a relationship that was very, very much, like, kind of part of my identity, and this time I was just totally rootless, like, I didn't have a community. In fact, where I lived changed every single day sometimes, and I was anonymous everywhere I went. No one knew me, no one, had any expectations of me, no one it was really liberating, and also just kind of, not like, no one could make plans with me, I make plans with you, or no one knows where I am unless I tell you where I am. It was that aspect of it was probably the most. I mean, people see van life and they just see, like, the epic destinations, and yeah, that's a major part of it, and it's amazing. But for me, it was the most transformative part of this was just totally being on my own without the external influence of literally anything other than a little bit here and there dabbling, and, like, then I'm on the move again. So, with that time, I really worked on whatever this whole amorphous concept of, like, your relationship with yourself is, and I mean, I even, like, set up little, you know, no like, digital detox, like, long periods of time, like, I even was in the woods for 2 weeks, with no internet at one point, just bathing in the river over there and reading books and going for walks and having little, like, ceremonies even.
Yeah.
It was really just so powerful and
Freeing, I can imagine. I'm curious, there's a question that's coming to me right now, like, as I just kind of look at all of your experiences throughout your life. Do you find that it could be like a real person or just like some kind of a voice inside you? Have you experienced some sort of a voice, again, whether it's internal or external, that's telling you you can't do that, and then an overriding voice that says, "Watch me, I'm gonna go do it"?
yes, yeah. I think you're picking up on, like, my inner rebel. That's my little black sheep. And I think because, like, I think we've talked a lot about, like, having strong authority figures, being told what to do, that being, like, a pattern of things that I, like,
Yeah.
even when it wasn't forced upon me, I would literally go seek it out sometimes. But at the same time, what I also naturally have, from being raised so strictly and so, counter to what my natural nature often was. There was a piece in me as a kid that would rebel in all sorts of ways. Sometimes, healthy, sometimes unhealthy. And there's a version of me even as an adult that I've caught myself, like sometimes like I'll even put, all of these, like, I'll be the dictator and the strong authority figure, but then there's the part of me within me that's like, "No, I wanna rebel against all these rules." Like, I don't wanna have this, like, crazy scheduler. I literally caught myself doing it last week. I had this big breakthrough, how even though I'm homesteading now, and even though now I work part-time in a job that I used to do for free, I don't even know what day of the week it is today. Oh, I guess it's a weekday. Like, I have all of that freedom, and yet there was still a part of me that realized I don't have enough hours in the day, and why do I feel like I'm not accomplishing enough, and why do I feel like I'm not getting this, tiny home built fast enough? And I realized, oh my gosh, now I'm just, I'm the dictator here making this not fun. But yeah, I would rebel and be like, I'm taking 3 days
Love it.
off. I'm just not gonna do anything. And now I'm trying to find more balance
I
because
love it.
I'm good at that, the whole like work hard, play hard thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that this will be the rest of my life, but I am trying to find more balance and just enjoy every little thing I do instead of making everything feel like a task that I only get to enjoy once it's achieved.
Yeah. I love it. So if kind of bringing this all together, as we think about 14 generations before you, and we talk about trauma, but I also think, because we think about trauma, I think in a negative sense, but there's also the good, right? There's 14 generations of good, bad, positive, negative, whatever you want to call it, that's come into you, and there's going to be 14 generations beyond you. I'm just curious, like, as you kind of reflect on your own life and maybe even imagining what was before you and what might come after, is there a thread that connects it all?
Oh, yeah. I think my thought was, I may not know all the stories of all these people who came before me, but they are literally like, they are living through me and experiencing this now. And I'm so grateful because I get to experience things because I am standing on their shoulders. I'm standing on one generation before me's shoulders. I see that so clearly. Both my parents were not born into the type of, like material wealth that I was born into, upper middle class, even if it's like the suburbs, which doesn't feel glamorous. Like that's actually would have been the ultimate to probably a great great grandparent probably would have looked at my life and been like, "What? This is insane." And yeah, the hardships that they endured, but also like there's a part of me that like feels that and experienced that also. I'm not gonna, like, take full credit for the things that they endured, but I know that, like, there's a fire in me that, like, they, got started, someone did, and, like, I'm just here stoking it continuously and trying to make it even better as for future generations. It's literally my responsibility.
Yeah.
I don't even, like, get mad about things, like, I know I opened this up talking, like, about a lot of dark, kind of, like, crazy things that
Yeah.
probably could have been in a horror movie, but look, that was the best my parents could come up with, and I see the big leaps and changes that they made from one generation before them to as their responsibility to improve what they were born into, and this is just my responsibility here, and I just think anyone who's alive right now has the tools and resources to do exactly what I'm doing. So and there's plenty of people who are way further on the path than me and maybe didn't have as, the same starting point that I did. But yeah, that's like I do this because of what I was born into and that I need to make it better, but I also do it for them because, I'm sure that's what, all these generations before me would have wanted and would be, you know, it's so excited. I had like a ceremony, it was just a thing that I made up, but a moment where I like called in both of my grandmothers on either side. They're both passed away now, but I just like wanted to have a conversation with them about, you know, any wisdom that they wanted to share with me because I think about, all the, ancestry a lot. And I just so clearly heard this message that was like, they were kind of like rolling their eyes at me and like, okay, here we go again. Like, why don't you just go enjoy your life? Like, we had such a hard time, but and like so that you like we suffered so much so that you could, have this amazing life. Like you already have it. Like go live it and like take it to the fullest. And so yeah, I thought that was pretty wise of them.
Very wise. And so I want to take that and I want to ask you, what is your hope and wish for the 14 generations that come after you?
Oh, I hope that, what some people say they see in me, which is a sense of adventure, a sense of fearlessness, a sense of, just curiosity and a belief that you can just literally go do whatever you wanna do. I would, like, I just think that if 14 generations of people were trying that out, who knows what could happen by then. And it's not even like I'm like, "Oh, you could create some new whiz bang gadget thing." It's more like that feeling of wholeness that I felt on the summit of Everest, like, could someone feel that for a lifetime? Could
Mm.
someone, like, pass that on to other people who aren't even related to them and, like, spread that? That would be I mean, that's maybe why we're here? I don't know. I don't have all the
That
answers.
that is an amazing way to wrap it up here. I love that so much, but I do have a couple final questions for you. So what's next for you?
I feel like the 50-meter target is Miriam Lancewood, who I listened to her episode that you
Yeah.
recorded also, one of my dear friends. We are heading to India. We're going to the Indian Himalayas this time for 2 months of just trekking a few iconic passes that we're really excited about, but we're not we're guiding ourselves, and we're not hiring any porters or anyone to help us carry our stuff or any
Wow.
donkeys, nothing. It's just us, and, I've got a Garmin inReach, so I'll be
Yes.
navigating that, but yeah, because we both were in this book, Wilder Journeys, both contributed to it, and we feel like the ethos of this book is really all about, taking these explorations, through nature and having these transformative experiences out there, and we've done some, like we've done some hardcore stuff in Bulgaria together, but we hadn't, like, gone on, like, a proper expedition like this before.
Yeah.
So, we're really excited to go out there and do that. So, yeah, that's I leave in a month, less than a month now, so that's coming up, and, at the same time, I'm also I know I said before, like, a lot of people leave McKinsey and become entrepreneurs, but, my friend and I, Kayla, we've been working on a project called Free Reign, and it's still being developed, but essentially we're trying to help connect veterans with outdoor opportunities once they transition out of the service, whether it's, a job that involves being outdoors, whether it's having a conventional job with an unconventional lifestyle like me, homesteading, or if it's, just finding time to volunteer, but we're trying to create like a community and a library of resources and educational content for that. So we're kind of developing that on mostly YouTube. So those are kind of the big things going on right now. And obviously, keep these 15 chickens alive and keep the homestead growing.
I love it. Yeah, so, if people wanna find out more about you or kinda follow your adventures, what's the best way for them to do that?
I post on, I have a personal Instagram account at Sophie Hilaire. So I kind of, like to share little creative versions of, my reality on there from time to time. And once I have a podcast established, blah, blah, black sheep. It's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Um, and so if people subscribe to that, then they'll start hearing once the pilot episode actually drops, which will be closer to the end of this year.
Awesome.
But yeah, definitely will be little updates on there about the homestead, and, that whole podcast is about my life as a black sheep. Like, the first several episodes will be kinda laying out my story in each of these chapters of life, starting with West Point, actually. But after that, I wanna start bringing on guests who I think are other black sheep who have created or made lives for themselves outside the system, because I know that my version of
Yeah.
my life interesting to some people, but not necessarily applicable to everyone. So I just want to bring on more examples of people who are making their own way in the world.
Yeah, I love that so much. And then finally, Wilder Journeys, amazing book. What's the best way for people to get a hold of a copy?
Yeah. Well, if you go on their website, Wilder Journeys, you can find all different, links to purchase the book. It's on Amazon. I know some people don't like using Amazon. Some people only use Amazon. But that's where I send most folks to go get a copy.
You have lived truly an inspired life. You've got this culmination of 14 generations that live in you now. I know that at some point Hollywood's gonna find out about you. They're gonna wanna make a movie about your life. And when they do, I wanna know who's gonna be the Hollywood actress that's gonna play you in your movie.
No one has even asked me about the answer. I don't know. Maybe I'll just continue to write things. But, honestly, I don't watch a lot of movies. I watch, like, 2 movies a year. But people tell me this actress, Aubrey Plaza, looks like me. I don't she's like a comedian, so again, I
Right.
don't know if this but some people sometimes people are like, "That's your doppelganger," and you're like, "I don't see it at all." Well, I can kinda see it, and she's not even half Asian like me, so she could play me and
Aubrey
probably be
Plaza. All right. I
yeah,
love it. And so what's your movie going to be called?
blah, blah, black sheep, just like my podcast that I started that I will return to by the end of this year.
Yeah, blah blah black sheep, the movie and the podcast, which we are it's highly anticipated. I can't wait to listen to it. So I am so excited.
Yeah.
Sophie, thank you so much for being such an inspiration. Thank you for your service, and thank you for spending your time with me today and sharing your story with listeners. And for those listening, I hope you have been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Sophie's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell, or you just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thank you for listening. Sophie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott.